Hey everybody, coming at you from my gear room. Now we're continuing with our summer of heat and humidity and heat indexes of around 105 to 110 degrees Fahrenheit. So I'm not planning any outdoor videos right now. I don't camp in this weather, period. So I'm taking care of some of the indoor stuff, and I've got multiple requests in the past for my opinion on survival and bushcraft and camping and outdoors books. So now's a good time to do this video. And so what I've done is I have picked out 50 books. So 50 of the books that I think are worth reading and worth having. And I'm going to show them, and some of them I'm just going to talk about for a few seconds. Some I'll get into details, but when you're going through this amount of books, it's just going to be kind of a brief rundown of either good books or great books and must-read books if you're an outdoors person, camper, bushcrafter, survivalist. So I feel like if there's a book that you're interested in, pause the video, take a picture with your cell phone, or write down the title. Alright, so let's try to get through these 50 books. So let's start out with wilderness survival guides. Okay, now these books here are what I consider a must-read. Okay, this is the Hawks Special Forces Survival Handbook. Now this is the 256 page version. He first came out with the Hawks Green Beret Survival Manual. This was 629 pages. This is a very big book. To me, this is an absolute must-have, must-read, if you can still find it. It's got a few illustrations in it. It's got pretty much every single subject known to man on, survival. But I don't even know if you can get that one anymore. But this is the smaller, condensed version, and it's just full of things: water purification, hygiene. There's different, like making nets and traps and stuff, weapons, tools, how to read streams, universal edibility test. That's a great book. All right. So this is by John Lofty Wiseman. That's the main book. This is a must-have. This thing was printed originally back in the 80s, and this pretty much covers everything around the world. And he was a specialist in the jungles, and he was in the SAS, and it's got like just everything you could think of: plants, first aid, reading signs, a little bit about knots, simple knots, cooking outdoors, shelter and shelter making, fishing, fungi, mushrooms. But that's the one that I would buy right there. But they also made a little bitty version of it right there that's well worth reading too. This is another must read. People that watch my channel all the time hear me constantly talking about Morris Kohansky. Well, this is Bushcraft, and this is the updated version. The one before this was called Northern Bushcraft, and it's sort of based on cold weather from up in Canada, but there is so much knowledge in here on bushcraft and survival techniques. It's beyond belief. This thing right here, he's got stuff wrote in this book that nobody else has wrote. And he said that when he originally came out with his book in 1988, he dedicated a whole chapter to axemanship, and not that many did an entire. I mean, everything you want to know about an axe. If you didn't have a grandfather that could teach you about an axe, this book will be your grandfather. But anyway, that's the Bushcraft book. Now, they did an update version of it. Basic Safe Travel and Boreal Survival Handbook. This is a little more survival than it is bushcraft, and it's got the things updated that he said he wished he'd put into the 1988 book. And it's all full of good illustrations too, and things that he's learned over the years. And things that Moores is known for: super shelter and a tri-stick. Now, I've read both of those copies several times, but this is a copy I don't read. Everybody hears me talk about my friends from California, Chris and Amanda. Well, Amanda worked with a woman that had relatives that lived in Canada, and one of the relatives had passed away, and they were going through his possessions, and lo and behold, a copy of Bushcraft. But look at that. To Dave from Morris Kohansky, May 2nd, 2007. Now, I don't know what Dave it was, But this is a cherished book right here. Isn't that awesome? All right, now on to these others right here. People that know Les Stroud, I will say this: if you have never seen his TV shows, these are great books. Survive and Will to Live. If you have seen his shows, these will be a pass, because most of everything in here is stuff that he's done on his TV show. And see, it's even got pictures drawn out of when he was filming. See, that was when he was in the desert, and that right there is when he was out there in that island off of Belize, I think, maybe. All these, everything, almost everything in here. There's a few pictures that weren't in his TV shows, but basically, if you saw his shows, you've seen it. And then this was his other version here, and there's things in this book that's not in that book. And it's got, you know, it's got some photographs in here, but all these photographs, that's when he ate the witchetty grubs on that TV show. And I don't know what that was from. I don't think that was on the TV show. But, I mean, I've seen him. This is when he did the plane wreck. You know, that was when he was on Discovery Shark Week. You know, a lot of this stuff is from his TV show. But, I mean, you know, if you're a big fan of his, those are good books. Now, that Dave Canterbury guy come out with a Bushcraft 101, and I passed on that because I flipped through it, and everything in it looked like everything else that you'd ever seen before. But this one, the Bushcraft Guide, the Trapping, Gathering, and Cooking, it's got a lot of tidbits in here that a lot of the other books don't have. Unconventional books, cooking, preservation, small game, traps. It's got some really good pictures in here about plants, what to eat, what to not eat, safe plants, safe plants, edible, safe, you know. Look at these and study them. But then it's got the whole section on avoid. So that part's pretty good. So that right there is a pretty good book right there. These next three right here are wilderness, survival, I don't know, camping, bushcraft manuals that you probably never have heard of. This is Hugh McManus, and this is a really good book because the illustrations in it are fantastic. And there are a lot of tidbits of information in here that aren't in the other survival books. They've got like climbing, you know, and how to climb a rope, and mantling, whatever that is, and crossing deserts, and how to survive in the desert, how to set up in a desert, assessing the weather, you know, using maps, deciding to move, on the move, cooking methods. This is a cooking utensils. This is a great one. Preparing fish, angling techniques, how to read the water. This is a very good book. I'm not sure who this Hugh McManus is, but he definitely knows what he's doing. Seems like he might have been military, I think. Dismantling a tent. That's a great book right there. Complete Wilderness Training Manual. Chris McNabb, Special Forces Survival Guide. Wilderness Survival Skills from the World's Most Elite Military Units. This book here I probably have read 3 times. This is a really, really good book. This book presents the field-tested skills of the most elite commandos: SEALs, Rangers, Delta Force, Green Beret, Royal Marines, French Foreign Legion, Australian SAS, Canadian Special Forces. This is a good one. It's got a bunch of, it's from all around the world. This is a worldly survival book. It's not really dedicated to one place. Edible desert plants and dry riverbed, plant weather indicators. All of the things are in black and white. Rescue procedures, a little bit on knots, desert shelter, igloo. Like I said, this is for all around the world. TP fire, filleting fish, harpoon. Oh, there's that a spear thrower, or what you call it. Some people call it a tally, I think. Anyway, that's a really good book. Survival is a Dying Art. Barry Davies and Phil Baynon, I think. This is an old book, but it's a very good book. I can't remember what year it is. Well, the reprint is 99. I think it was originally published up before that, I think. But this is a pretty good book right here. There's a lot of reading, and there's not a whole lot of illustrations in it. And they're kind of black and white. That shows the old trick, directing without a compass. How to fillet, you know, how to cook. how to rig up a hammock. This is the book that's got the illustrations that you're always seeing on Facebook and Instagram, where they're like, "Oh, set up a shelter like this." But there's something with a car battery starting a fire, fire lighting. That's a good book. Survival is a Dying Art. That's a very good book. Now, that is Wilderness Survival. Now, these books here, this is an entertaining book. This is survival everywhere. This is like escape from quicksand, wrestle an alligator, break down the door, land a plane. It's the worst case scenario survival handbook. Joshua Piven and David something, Borg something. I ain't even going to try to pronounce it. But there's all kinds of stuff in here. Like, of course, now you'll recognize that. That's a bow drill. And then you've got, like, what is that? How to survive if you're in a line of gunfire. How to survive in an avalanche. You know, how to survive if your parachute fails open. This is just basic all-around survival knowledge. How to survive adrift at sea. You know, how to treat a bullet or a knife wound. How to treat frostbite. How to search for a bomb. how to use a defibrillator to restore a heartbeat. How to perform a tracheotomy. You know, there's just how to deal with a charging bull. It's a very entertaining book, but there is some tidbits of good stuff in there, you know. This, Kai Fornio, I think she was on one of those TV shows. She might have been on Alone, maybe, or Naked and Afraid or something. But this thing right here's got a whole lot of different stuff about preparing and floods and tornadoes and electrical fires and when your vehicle is on fire. And then, you know, it's got the wilderness survival type stuff. And it's got this typical reflector wall, you know, that everybody does, and bamboo fire. And it's got all the bushcraft type stuff that you've seen in every other book. But it's still a pretty good book. You know, The Essential Survival Guide, Ken Griffiths. I've read this a couple of times. This is a pretty good. How much of a survivor are you? Avalanche, dropped in the middle of a jungle, shipwrecked on an uninhabited island, or found yourself in the middle of a strange city. See, this is one of those books that pretty much covers everything. Surviving people, escape and evasion, natural disasters, trains, carjacking. There's very few illustrations in here. See, there's something right there. The solar steel, that's in every book. There's a lot of information on the wilderness part of this thing that you've seen in every other book. But it's not a bad book. How to Start a Fire with Water, David Arama. This is a decent book because there's all kinds. It's very easy to read. And it's the way it's saving someone who falls through the ice, boat safety, avoid cold shock, rescue a person overboard, forage with calories in mind, build a desert shelter, build a platform shelter. You know, it's just a neat book. I like it. Layer in any weather, expert clothing advice, 3-layer system, wilderness first aid, know how to evacuate from, you know, an avalanche, keep gas in your car. It's a pretty good book. I liked it. That's a real good book. As we drift from the survival into the camping era of things, another good thing that you can do is the old Boy Scout handbooks. This is a good example of the perfect Scout handbook, 1958. It has very basic information in it. You know, edible wild plants. This is back when scouting was actually about scouting in the wilderness. So there's a reflector oven, you know, cooking outdoors, mess kits, wood lore, you know your trees, you know, and measuring heights. That was about, you know, camping trail to first class. Severe bleeding. It's got some first aid. It's got some cooking in here. 1958. That's a great one. What to do if lost, you know. And then there's a little bit of other stuff in here. Rules for being a scout, knots, you know, stuff like that. That's a great book. This one's from the 70s. This is still pretty good, but when it started getting into the 80s, it kind of started going downhill. And it went really downhill in the 90s as far as, you know, outdoors and letting scouts use knives and axes and things like that. Now, let's dip off into the military side of things. They had, if you're lucky enough to find these books, like these old military manuals, this is Evasion and Escape. This was belonged to Captain George Davenport. The USAR, I never could figure it out. I used to think it was U.S. Army Reserve, but after seeing this other book that said Captain Davenport USAR, I figured it's U.S. Army Ranger. But these are good little books if you can find these. These are 1965. They're very hard to find, and you really don't want to thumb through them too much. But it's got all kinds of good information in it. Very few, if any, illustrations. It's all reading, but there's great information in these little books right here. That looks like it was actually done with a typewriter. But they tell you about what some of the things to do. Now, if you can't go digging around looking for that, they have reprints of these things. Look, the U.S. Army, the complete U.S. Army Survival Guide to Foraging Skills, Tactics, and Techniques. And see, this is a reprint of all the old Army type tactics and things. A lot of these illustrations are really blurry, but, you know, there's a lot of very, very good information in here. And then they've got a much larger edition. Why don't you look at the size of this? The Ultimate Guide to U.S. Army Survival Skills, Tactics, and Techniques. Look at that. This is a gigantic book. It is 953 pages. And it's got, it's got a reprint of all the old Army stuff. These guys beating each other up and doing hand-to-hand combat, choking each other. And then it's got some, you know, it's got a few photographs in there, but they're about like the other one. Dangerous fish and mollusk. Food procurement, talks about trapping and stuff, making gill nets and, you know, setting up for cooking. Water procurement, position design details. I don't even know what that is. I guess it's shelters. Yeah, it must be. Look at that. Above ground cavity wall shelter. So this covers everything here. Planning positions, rescue and transportation procedures, first aid for injuries, first aid for fractures, first aid for special wounds. There's a lot of knowledge in this book. I have not read this entire book, but I've read bits and pieces, and it's really good. This stack book here, as far as I'm concerned, is a must-read, must-own. If you are a bushcrafter, camper, survivalist, you must have both of these books, because these are the way things used to be done. Shelters, Shacks, and Shanties by Daniel Beard. Now let's take a look inside here. I believe this is where a lot of, look, 1914, Daniel Carter Beard, 1914. This is back way before the internet, even before TV. This is back when people did things outdoors. How to make the fallen tree shelter in the Scoutmaster. You know, this is all kinds of old illustrations on things that I don't know why. You would think that people would be ripping these off and using them, and you'd think you'd be seeing them everywhere, but some of these illustrations are nowhere. And I have in here marked, look at that. Those are so cool. Some of these old drawings, these fireplaces and these chimneys and cabins. How to make a fireplace and a chimney for a simple log cabin. Look at that. I haven't seen these. Usually these illustrations, there's some joints and notches and stuff. Usually these illustrations are stolen and all over memes and Facebook and stuff like that, but I haven't seen these. Now my favorite is on page 109. I have it marked, and it's called The American Boy's Hogan or Underground House. And what it is you dig into the side of a the side of a hill, and then you build a wooden frame like this, and then you cover it with dirt. And so you've got a little hidden place where you crawl under, and then there's your living area, and then there's a chimney. See, that kind of stuff. I have never seen this in any other book. And if I ever get property, this is my dream shelter. I was talking to my friend Chris about this, and I said, this is the one that I'm going to build. This will be a long-term bug out place. So, Shelter, Shacks, and Shanties. This other thing, the Field and Forest Handy Book by Daniel Beard, it's just full of old world knowledge. All kinds of old stuff that you've never seen. And I don't know, people have not ripped off any of his ideas or his illustrations. This stuff's incredible. This is a must-have book. You'll love this. You'll read it. You'll read it. You'll read it. There's so much stuff. I got one of my favorite little things in here is this little raft. Look, there's pictures of me and Nick. That's a bookmark. Look, how to cross a stream on a log. How to build a logomarian Logomoran, and how to make a blow bed ferry, how to ford swift streams. Well, look, this is the illustration that caught my eye. See, this guy's got a big old log, and he's got these logs bowed over and tied. He's got his axe buried in the front. He's pushing himself off with his dog and all of his gear. See, that is just so cool. That's the Logomoran, similar to a catamaran. Let's see if this thing's got a date on it. The Field and Forest Handybook, Daniel Beard, Dover Publications, 1912. Look at that. That is a must-have. Now, everybody has heard of Horace Kephart, Camping and Woodcraft. This is a must-have. That is Mr. Kephart. He traveled around all over Tennessee, and he helped set up the Great Smoky Mountain National Park. This book's about 425 pages. And there's so much information in here on outdoor living that it's ridiculous. And he learned all this and wrote it down. He was one of the very first original writers of this stuff. But this is a must-have. There's a lot of reading in here and very few illustrations. But this is awesome. It talks about the way things used to be done. Now, two more over here. Well, let's look at this other stack. This is a stack I can take or I can leave, and the fact that how new they are, they're not bad. This is the Field and Stream Camping Guide. The only reason I say I can take it or leave it is because this is a lot of recycled information, but it's fun to look at and fun to read. But there's a lot of stuff. If you're a beginner, this is pretty cool. Or if you're in a hurry and you don't want to spend a lot of time reading stuff. But this is a lot of the stuff that was in the Field and Stream magazine, and this wasn't written by one person. This is written by several people that wrote for the magazine. There's that one, and then there's a Field and Stream, the Total Outdoorsman Skills and Tools. This covers pretty much everything: fishing, camping, hunting. You know, the pictures in it are really cool. Different blade shapes. This is not a bad book. It's not a must-have, but like if you could see it. If you could get it marked down, you know, and see there's all kinds of tips. It's the kind of tips that they have in their magazines. It's kind of like reading their magazine without the other stuff. And then here's another Field and Stream, the Total Knife Manual, 141 Essential Skills and Techniques. If you have a young kid, this is a great book. Or if you're a beginner, like I say, it's got all the different axe heads. You know, it's got a whole section on axes, a little bit about traps, a little bit about firewood and fire starting, signal fires, all about knives. Look, there's Bear Grylls chasing down a wild boar. Look at that look on his face. Sure does look calm looking. That's why it's a cartoon. And there's a dude. That's an operator right there shaving with a knife. How to sharpen. That's not a bad book. It's not a must-have book, but it's not a bad book. And you know, it's probably the best book out of all of these, I think. So, all right, moving on along. Here's some more books that are more along the lines of the camping genre. And this is the 2-Ounce Backpacker by Robert S. Wood. This is a pretty neat little book written by a backpacker. So there's a lot of tidbits of good information in here. And talking about stoves, talking about tents, how to stay dry, you know, where not to camp, how to pack hypothermia, dealing with sprains, how to pack your pack, how to stay in shape. You know, that's a pretty good book right there. This, Horses, Hitches, and Rocky Trails by Joe Back. Now, regardless if you travel by horse or canoe or kayak or ATV or you hike, this is a pretty cool book because it's written about the way things used to be, and it's got like hitches and saddles and cowboy rolls and there's just a little bit about camping in there too. It's not a bad book. It's worth buying if you ever find it. Joe Back, if you ever find one. Tom Brown's Field Guide to the Forgotten Wilderness by the author of the tracker, Tom Brown Jr. Now, out of all of the Tom Brown books, I'd say this is the best one. This has got the most knowledge that you will not get out of other books. And there's like muskrat, there's boat-tailed grackle. There's all kinds of stuff in here about animals in here that is just fascinating. There is a pygmy shrew. There is a lot of information about animals in here. There's areas about forest and plants in here. See, the country. Urban wilderness, feral cats, green herons, feral dog. All kinds of stuff in here about animals. Something in there about the city, but there's a lot of stuff in here I've never seen, never heard of. Suburban wilderness. Anything, any animal or plant in any area he has written about in this book. Tom Brown's Field Guide to the Forgotten Wilderness. Now, this book right here, as far as I'm concerned, is a must-read. This is one of the most fascinating books I've ever read. Now, I'm going to tell you something else. These old books, anytime you see these stack pole books, they are the best books from years ago. Stack pole books. Now, this book, Seeing More in Nature's Familiar Faces and Reading the Woods by Vincent Brown. This book is fascinating because this book dives into things that no other book has ever went into. It gets into when a fire burns the forest and how the forest rebirths itself and what's going on in the soil and what happens to trees when they die and decay and what the animals do to those decayed trees and the decayed plants. And what you can tell the climate change, and you can tell what bugs are going to infestate a forest. And there's a few pictures in here. Southern swamps in the forest. Understanding the leaf dropping forest. It tells you all about what happens when leaves fall. Reading signpost in evergreen forest. Reading signpost in evergreen forest. Let's see. It keeps going. That's a long chapter. How animals and man fashion in the woods. How animals and man fashions in the woods. Being prepared for the forest fires. Talks about what it does to the trees and how it rebirths. Knowing the story in the soil. This talks about what goes on in the ground in the forest as leaves decay. This is just absolutely fascinating. I don't know who this Vincent Brown guy is, but this is packed full of knowledge you ain't gonna find anywhere else. If you can ever find a book like this, Outdoor Living Skills Program by the American Camping Association, this is not only a good beginner book, but it's also how they did things years ago before the internet and before a lot of fancy gear came out. But it just talks about camping. But that's a pretty good book right there. If you can ever find this book, this is the ultimate book to own. Just like I said earlier, this is a stack pole book. See on the inside cover? Now, this is 1,130 pages. Now, some people, their granddad hunted and fished and maybe trapped. Their dad hunted, fished, maybe trapped. Then they passed it on to the son. For those of you that didn't have forefathers that taught you about hunting and fishing, this book will be your granddad. This thing right here, it's got a couple of chapters in it on camping, but it's got big game, it's got small game, animal predators. There's animal predators. It's got firearms, ammunition, dogs, hunting with dogs, the complete hunter, everything. Archery, airplanes, boats, camp bedding, camp foods. It gets deep into camping and canoe trips, canoe hunting, compasses, decoys, shooting safety, snowshoes, and let's see, index to, let's see, decoys, geese, and ducks. This thing has got, there's a chapter on moose, there's black-tailed deer, there's polar bear. They go very, very deep, very, very deep into rabbits, small game, possum, gray squirrel, red fox. They go so deep into talking about the animals here. It's unbelievable. The details they go in, the tracking, what they eat, what they don't eat. Look, owls, North American wolf. There is so much knowledge here, and all this went on, and this is by several different authors. Weasel, grouse hunting, quail hunting, ducks. This was all before the internet, when everything got kind of blurry, and you got some good information, some bad information. Geese, ducks, waterfowl hunting. Then it gets into the rifles. Those are real old. Rifle shooting, custom built rifles, rifle shooting, trap shooting, handgun shooting, handgun regulation, shotgun. Gets into beagles and the beagle hound, hunting dogs, curly-tailed retriever, Irish setter, Beagle Hound. Okay, now this back here is what I really like. They get into archery, blinds, boats, and then back into here. Look, there's a dude right there. It's got a bunch of dead birds in there. Camp cookery. Okay, this is some of the part I like. Camp bedding, because anything that's really, really old information, I love. See, it's got like this old thing where they're cooking multiple things over there. Talk a good bit about camps and camp cookery, and the clothing for hunters. That's a great book right there. Now, if you're going to get a book on trapping, like I said, there's a lot of the modern books that were written that people just read stuff on the internet and got stuff off of YouTube or whatever. The older the trapping book you can get, the better. This is by Rick Jameson. Let's see. Jameson, 36, who began trapping on his father's farm in northeast of Kansas as a young lad. Now, let's see if we can find a copyright date. This is all about traps and snares and stuff. I don't see it, but I know this is a very extremely old book. Well, that's weird. It doesn't have a date on it. Anyway, why trap, foot and body traps, trap coverings, trap devices, dyeing, baits, lures, marking traps, fur bearers, large fur bearers, small fur bearers, water dwelling. There's a lot of old information. There was a lot of stuff in here I've never seen before about trapping from a guy that really does a lot of trapping. Let's breeze through some of these other books here that might be useful for the outdoors. As far as navigation goes, this is the only book that I say is a must-have. You don't need any other book besides this one. It's by Bob Burns and Mike Burns, Wilderness Navigation, Mountaineers Outdoor Basics. This thing covers absolutely everything, old techniques and new techniques. It talks about maps, talks about compasses, talks about what to do when you're lost, orientation with a map with a compass, bearings on the map. It also talks about a little bit on GPS. That's a great book right there. That is a must-have. Now these books right here I like, whether you're into canoeing or kayaking or boating. These are pretty good. This one by Mark Shriver, it's not a bad book. It was a cheap book. I got it for $2.99 at Ollie's. Well worth $2.99. I don't know if I'd pay full price for it, but there's a lot of good stuff in here. Good pictures in here, good tips. Couple of recipes, cooking with fire. Talks about bear bags, tents. It's more of an all-around outdoor book than it is a canoe book, because it's called Canoe Camping. This is a really good book here by Alan S. Kesselheim, Canoeing in the Wilderness, a handbook. This thing is packed full of tons of information about water safety in canoes and how to pack for a trip and what to do and what to expect, and water flow and navigating rivers, safety gear, stuff like that. This is a very, very good book. If you're interested in anything on the water, that's a good one. This is a very, very old book called Canoeing, and it's by the American Red Cross. And of all people, you wouldn't think this would be a good book, but this is a very good book. It's got a lot of real old world information in it. What to do if you turn over, what to do if you fall out, how to put the canoe in, how to paddle. This is back before information got muddled by the internet. Look, 1977 was the original printing. Now over here, these are worthy of a mention. How to Make Cowboy Horse Gear. That is such a cool book, because if you're into leather working, this is cool, especially if you're into knots and weaving and maybe even pack making and loops and things and bridles and hitches. That's a pretty cool book. I love this book, Indian Handicrafts or Handcrafts. And this is how the native Indians made things. The illustrations are pretty cool. Look, it even had to carve stuff. It's full of all kinds of. This is true bushcraft. This is actually way before bushcraft. This is borderline primitive. Some of this stuff in here, braiding patterns, make a hammock or a gill net, the primitive way. Making an actual shirt, trade shirt. There's a dugout canoe right there. That's awesome. Reproducing the dugout. It shows step by step how to do it. That alone, for a bushcrafter, the book should be worth it. That's how you burn out a dugout canoe. Handy if you wind up on dual survival. That's a shelter. I don't know, wigwam, that was it. I was thinking of the name. Shows you how to peel the bark off a tree. This kind of stuff right here showed you how to make a bed there a minute ago. Purse net for, I guess, catching fish. Look at that. That was one of the originals. People talk about a netting needle, netting needle, or a shuttle. Look, shows you how to do it and what the dimensions should be even. Look at that. 3/4 inch and a half, 5 inch, 5/8 wide. That's pretty incredible right there. Duck decoys. See, this is all, like I said before, the internet muddled all this information. Knots are knots. If you're a survivalist, if you're a bushcrafter, if you're a camper, if you're an outdoorsy person, whatever, you're going to run into all different kind of knots, and they're very useful. Most of the books are about the same, but these 3 books are my absolute favorite. Once I got hold of these 3 books, I didn't buy any other books. And I believe this one is my favorite. Handbook of Knots, Expanded Edition, Des Paulson. I like this book. It just seems like it was just easiest to understand, and I like the pictures, and I like the way everything was explained. Knots are knots. There's not a whole lot to say about it. Hitches, sheep bend, Turk's head, thief knot, true lover's knot, wall knot. That's a good book right there. That's my favorite out of these 3. But they're all good. This one's by Jeffrey Budworth and Jason Dalton, The Little Book of Incredibly Useful Knots. The illustration, this one's kind of small, and they don't really show step by step. They just kind of show the knot. A few of them they'll show step by step. That's not my favorite, but it's not a bad book. I think this book's better because it shows more, you know, how to do them. Knots and rope. Ultimate Encyclopedia of Knots and Rope Worth. Look, Jeffrey Budworth. See, this is the same guy that was involved with this one. That's why this Des Paulson, I think, did the best job. But this is a little more detailed than that other one. It actually shows the steps. So I like it a lot better than the other little book. This is a pretty good book, too. It's a book full of knots. Now, if you're going to be into the outdoors, you need to learn about what is outdoors. And this is a very good book on insects, The Pocket Guide to Insects. It's got butterflies in there, and it's got, you need to learn the mealy bugs, the things that'll eat you up, green shield bug, mole crickets. The pictures are great in this book. Hoverflies, flies, stoneflies. It's very interesting for the outdoors. It's by Patrick Hook. It's a good book. All of these Audubon books are great. Audubon field guides, these are great. These are fantastic. You can learn about snakes in here and frogs and reptiles and every lizards and you know, there's turtles and frogs and toads and, you know, like frogs you can eat, toads you don't eat, salamanders, you know, what to use for bait and stuff. That's a good one right there. It's good to learn this stuff if you're going to be outdoors. Here's another Audubon one, Society Nature Guides to the Wetlands. This is awesome right here because it talks about all these different animals and plants, and it talks about what range they're in, what area of the United States that they can be found in. And then there's a small section in here with pictures in them. But I think there's different guides, trees, plants, animals, everything. This is a really good one. Usually if it says Audubon Society, it's a good one. Now, over here, you really want to learn about trees. These little golden guides, they got like cartoons in them, but they're kind of neat to carry with you in your pack because they've got the bark, the nuts, and the leaves. I like these little golden guides. They're pretty good. They're kind of old. And now this is fantastic. Another Audubon Society, the Field Guide to Trees. And you really, really, if you're a bushcrafter or survivalist, you really, really need to learn trees. You need to learn the different needles, the different leaves, the different seeds, the different bark, what parts of the tree you can eat, what you can boil in water, what's safe to process for wood. Alan J. Combs. This is another pretty good. The Visual Guide to More Than 500 Trees from Around the World. The illustrations in this are fantastic because these are actually photographs in here, and it'll show the bark, the nut, the leaves. This is a really, really good one, and it's divided up in and it explains to you the different types of lobed and toothed leaves and untoothed leaves and stuff like that. And it's divided up into broadleaves, broadleaves. I think there's a conifers, yeah, broadleaves, conifers, yeah. But that is a very good book there. This is a pretty good book. It's actually by Reader's Digest. Reader's Digest is so old that this is pretty decent information here. Magic and Medicine of Plants. And it talks about all the different kind of plants and what you can do with them. What's edible, what's not edible, and the uses of them. If you can find one of these books, I have looked back and studied at this book for so many times. Reader's Digest, Magic and Medicine of Plants. Now this is another one right here that for me, I don't know about y'all that live up north, but for down south, this is the Mac Daddy of all books. This is a must-own. Weeds of the South. Because weeds ain't planted. Weeds sprout up everywhere in the wilderness. And it talks about the leaves and the chemistry of the plant, what's inside it. It shows pictures of what's underground, you know, the root of it. It tells everything about weeds. This is an incredible book. This is a great book. I've spent hours. Sometimes whenever I don't feel like doing anything at night before bed, I'll grab this and flip through a few pages and read. You have to read it about 5 times to remember everything, though. I didn't say anything at the beginning of the video so that you would skip to the end of the video. I didn't say that my most favorite, #1, most cherished book would be at the end, but I saved it for last. This is, and I believe it's a 1968 edition, but you've heard of the Wayland, the Wayland, it's either Wayland or Wayland. Look at this, I can't even get this thing open. Come on now. I keep it in here because I don't want to damage this thing. This is On Your Own in the Wilderness by Colonel Townsend Whelan, Distinguished Outdoor Editor, and Bradford Angier, I think that's how you pronounce it, author of Living Off the Country. Now, Colonel Whelan died in, I think, 1960 or 61, but this is a later printing. I think this was 68, but I'm not real sure. But this thing right here is how they used to do things. And this is an absolute joy to read, because not only will you be entertained, but you will learn. Okay, it was originally written in 1958. Well, originally published in 1958 by Townsend Whelan and Bradford Angier. This is a 6th edition printing, 1968. That's Brad's wife. She was involved in this book. But anyway, Bradford was an all-around outdoorsy person, hunter, trapper, fisher, camper. Colonel Townsend Whelan was a outdoorsman. He was born in like the 1800s. And this is old world knowledge. Provision for camping, meat, fur, trophies, rawhide, hunting message, paddle, pole, and portage, automobile, motorboat camping, always knowing where you are, take care of yourself, mosquitoes, footwear for trails, bedtime stories, the campfire, stoves. Like I said, this was originally put together in 1958. Now, everybody's heard of the Whelan shelter. Look, pattern for making the Whelan lean-to tent. Isn't that neat? He invented it. And then some company started making them, I think. That's Colonel Townsend right there, Townsend Whelan forester tent. There's actual pictures of him. Simple overnight. But this is just written, and there's another one. He called it the Hunter's Lean-To. I can't remember who it is. Somebody from Abercrombie and Fitch or some well-known company outfitter started making them and called them the Whelan tent. Tents for wilderness camping. I spent all my boyhood summers in the North Woods. But anyway, this, like I said, this is how it was done years ago. There's a few illustrations and there's a few photographs. Where to not sleep. 2 good hiking packs. Most inexpensive vacations. There he is right there, Colonel Townsend Whelan. But this right here is absolutely my favorite book, my most cherished possession. I love it. If you can get a copy of it, this is the book to get. And like I said, Stackpole Books. Alright, so that's that. I don't know if it's going to be a long video or not. I'll find out after editing. If you stayed with me this long. But all of those books are worth having, I think. I got a bunch of lousy books in there that they're not even worth mentioning. But these I think are good books, and it's just, you know, a lot of times, I don't know, there's just something about it. I want you to watch YouTube videos, and TV can be entertaining, but it is so good for your mind to actually sit down in a quiet room and just read a book. And, you know, for me, if my back is hurting, I don't feel good, if it's 120 degrees outside, you know, if it's raining or snowing or whatever, I'll put me on a pot of coffee and I'll grab a book and look at it and read it. And just, it also helps clear my mind. Like if I had a bad day at work, I'll clear my mind and just dive into a book, especially these older ones. I will dive into them things and just immerse myself, and it's really good for your brain. So, anyway, like I say, when the weather cools off, we're going to be back out camping and bushcrafting out in the wilderness where we belong. So, till then, in the meantime, keep learning, expand your mind, don't worry about the problems of the world. You take your free time and try to enjoy life, because you're going to be old before you know it. Take it easy, enjoy life, and we shall see you in the next one.